Hello and welcome back to Cambridge TV News. Today I am joined by Dr. Anna Middleton from the Wellcome Genome Campus, who is here to discuss her work exploring the public perception of genomics. Welcome.
Thank you.
So first of all, tell me a little bit, what were you talking about when we say genomics?
So genomics is all about the 20,000 or so genes that we have and the bits of DNA between them, and you can tell your past, present and future health in your genes. And genomics is about the study of all of that really and what it means for an individual.
And so at the moment, how good is our understanding of genomics?
Well, it's sort of at a very embryonic phase really in terms of interpreting. For some things we know an awful lot about certain genes, but when we look at all of the genes together, we're at this very early stage at being able to predict future health. So it depends really. If somebody's got a very strong family history of something, say young onset breast cancer, so you have many women with breast cancer in their 30s, then we would probably want to test for a gene called BRCA1 or 2. And that might say that whether it's an inherited sort of breast cancer or not in the family, and we could do predictive testing on women who haven't yet got cancer. So for some conditions and for some genes there's a lot of information known about it, but for others it's at a very early stage.
And so how common is the usage of this in the NHS at the moment?
We're at this very exciting stage with genomics because it is being mainstreamed. So it used to be able to only get access to genetic testing in very specialist genetics clinics, and now it's being found across the whole of the health service. So you can find genetic testing in dermatology, in ENT, in paediatrics, in obstetrics. It really is across the NHS. And so that means that there's an urgent need really for the public and patients who are engaging with health services to know about what sorts of testing is available and what it means for them, and also what it means for their family, because anything to do with DNA is relevant for all of us who are, have relatives. So when somebody's having a test for something, the results of that might be actually relevant to all sorts of other people in the same family.
And so in my introduction there I said the public perception of genomics. Just explain to me, what does that mean?
So we know that the word genomics is not familiar to most people, and some empirical research has shown that 90% of the British public have never heard of it. So when you're wanting to implement a technology that most people have never heard of, there's a bit of a disconnect there, and there's a need to start to bring the terminology and what it means, what it can do for you, into general conversation. So what I'm doing as a social scientist researcher at the Wellcome Genome Campus is look at ways to start a conversation about genomics, how to make genomics actually connect for people, how to make it meaningful for them, and find an evidence base behind doing that. So I run various different projects that explore the public's attitudes towards lots of different things to do with genetics and DNA and genomics. But in order to be able to do that, you need to know how to entice people to even start a conversation. What is it, what metaphors, what memes, what things do they think it's about? And then once you can understand that, then you can start to draw them into a conversation and ask their views about lots of different things.
And so when you do speak to people, what do they think it's about? What answers do you get when you ask them these questions?
So, well, I did a series of focus groups with members of the public recently, and they were really good fun. I met with groups who were meeting already and not necessarily interested in genetics at all. So I met with the Women's Guild, I met with a men's curry club, I went out for curry with them, I met with a parents group, I met with the London Bridge Housing Estate residents group, and I asked them, have you heard of the word DNA? Most of them said yes, and they thought it was something to do with crime scenes and identifying bodies. They'd seen it on Silent Witness and CSI. I talked about genetics and they'd heard of that, but not too much knowledge. Thought it was something to do with families, which is right. And then when I asked about the word genomics, there's this sort of silence. And some people started to break down the word literally. They were saying genomics. No, is it something to do with gnomes? Quite incredibly, they're breaking it down phonetically. And that really spoke volumes that we need to really try and get across accurate information about what it is in a meaningful way. And so one of the things that I was looking at building on from that was maybe using the gnome character as a way to describe what sequencing is, what genetics is all about, the fishing for information, the searching for information, and using that as a building block to start a conversation.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think people have this perception of the idea DNA, but then when it gets to genomics, they have no idea at all?
Well, it's also new. I mean, it's as a discipline, it's not been around that long. It's just not in popular language yet. I mean, one of the other things that I'm interested in is the catch-up of popular film and the influence from popular culture in terms of our language. And so, like films like X-Men. I've got a PhD student who's looking particularly at this. Jurassic Park, films that use mutant. Genomics, these sorts of terms are actually mentioned in film, and how helpful are they for helping individuals and families talk about genetics? So I've got a PhD student looking at that at the moment, which is a really exciting project.
And so when you get people to the stage where they feel comfortable talking about the topic, they understand what you're trying to get across, what issues are you relaying to them? What issues are you asking their opinion on?
Well, various different things. I mean, I follow the principle that you can bring anybody and everybody up to speed with even the most abstract of concepts if you build on what they already know and you build on the language that they're already using. And so one of the projects that we're running at the moment is called Your DNA, Your Say, and this is all about genomic data sharing. And if you were sort of to try and break that down, you think genomics, oh, never heard of it, sounds a bit dull, data sharing sounds even duller. But actually, if you start to think about us all having an online footprint already and overlaying our medical information on top of that and potentially our DNA information on top of that, suddenly it becomes a little bit more interesting and a bit more relevant to all of us. And so that's what that study is all about. And we know that if you use film, which is one thing that I'm exploring a lot of, that you can start to entice people into conversations and bring them to surveys that you can then ask them to fill in. The Your DNA, Your Say project is really important because data sharing needs to happen on a massive scale if we're going to really fully realise the potential of genomics. So if you want to interpret a genome result in an individual, you do need to be able to compare that individual's results to the results from thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people. And those people needed to have donated their information at some point in time. So we do need lots of data to access for research, but also for clinical diagnosis for individual patients. But as part of this donation of data, that data sits online and gets shared around the world. It could end up anywhere, but by use by anybody, really. And I'm trying to understand what people think about that as a process. I mean, we're all very familiar with online banking, but we're perhaps not familiar with the concept of our DNA data being accessed around the world. And your DNA is your most personal information about you. It's more personal than a fingerprint or an iris scan. So how do people feel about that? And what are the perceived harms if that was hacked or you were identified from it? What do people think about that?
And so when you tell people this, what's their reaction and how aware are they that this information is being shared at the moment?
Well, most people that I've spoken to are not massively aware, but if they're in a healthcare setting already and maybe they're looking for a diagnosis, perhaps for a child with a really severe developmental disorder, say, often you'll hear patients saying, look, just share my data, go do great things with it, I want to contribute to research. If my data can be useful for other people, then fantastic. And they're often really surprised that the data sharing isn't happening more. And they feel that they really want to contribute in an altruistic way to the improvement of health, basically. Whereas other people who perhaps aren't involved in a healthcare setting and don't have a specific engagement with genetics at the moment are perhaps a little bit more cautious and would say, well, why would you need to do that? What's it for? Could I be at harm from this in any way? What about insurance companies? Could they potentially discriminate against me? Actually, they can't. But often people think that they might be discriminated against. So it raises ethical issues for people.
And so how can people get involved with your work and have their opinions expressed?
Oh, well, the Your DNA, Your Say project is just yourdnayoursay.org, and it's just a website and it's got the films in there. They explain what genomics is all about and what data sharing is, and then you go through a survey and participate, and it's actually quite good fun.
Okay. Dr. Anna Middleton, thank you very much.
Welcome.